Hello, fellas and ladies. It's time to review The Odyssey, directed by none other than Christopher Nolan, who people seem to really like a lot. The Odyssey is, of course, an adaptation of Homer's Odyssey, where Odysseus, played by Matt Damon, is the Greek king of Ithaca, and in the aftermath of the Trojan War, he takes a long and treacherous trip back home to his wife and son, encountering plenty of Greek mythology creatures along the way. Now, I have a somewhat interesting history with Chris Nolan and his legacy. It seems like most are, more than okay to, label him as a modern master. Some would even say he's one of the greatest directors of all time. And those who see like 4 movies a year would say him or Tarantino are the best directors of all time. And credit where it's due, he is someone who is able to sell original or prestige epics on his name alone. And his legacy as his godlike filmmaker is certainly not something that fell out of the sky. His efforts behind the camera have really pushed the industry a long way, and his passion and push for the theater experience, especially in IMAX, has certainly contributed to the format's evolving form and legitimacy of prestige cinema being seen as blockbuster events. Where my hesitation with him lies is in the way he writes films and what interests him in the form. Not to call him an egomaniac, although someone who refuses to wear anything but suits certainly can be seen as that. But he does have a tendency to over-enunciate the complexities of his very on-the-surface storytelling. Non-linear narrative is the go-to for him, for better and for worse. For better would be like Memento, and where he uses the non-linear format to his advantage, and for worse, probably The Odyssey. Nolan has a bit of a reputation amongst, the GP some snobbier people where his major fans are like high schoolers, watch his movies, and they like him because he makes them feel smart for understanding him. Because despite the wild sci-fi concept and suggested complexities, Nolan is very often extremely on the surface. Which isn't always a bad thing. One of Inception's bigger strengths is how insane its concept is, but how digestible and easy to understand Nolan made it. But it's probably no wonder that his worst reviewed film, Tenet, is the one that almost by design leaves the audiences in the dark. Tenet is a good barometer for how seriously I take someone's Nolan takes. Not to say anyone who loves that piece of shit movie is wrong and dumb, but more those who refuse to engage with the criticisms of it. Those who insist that the criticism that it's mostly all gibberish, that you're not supposed to understand it, just feel it. But when you say, oh, so by your admission, it matches Scorsese's definition of a theme park ride, they get hostile and say, no, it's pure deep cinema. And if you're like this review isn't for you. You already know you're going to love this movie. And furthermore, if you believe every word that Elon Musk says, then this is certainly not for you. I went into this with a clean slate, and I came out admiring it, but not really loving it. But even my lowest opinion on Nolan films, I can't deny what an absolute master he is as a director, and The Odyssey is no exception. He maybe lacks a distinct visual style, but he's so good at assembling a scene with his crew and building tension in epic set pieces. The set works on The Odyssey are impossible to not gawk at, and honestly, while this is far from his best film, he seems to be genuinely trying to evolve and not just stagnate his filmmaking and increasing the scale. I'm no Greek mythology expert, so I won't comment on the accuracy of this entirely fictional story full of fictional characters, but the set design and costume work are eye-catching. Due to logistical reasons, I did have to go to a 70mm screening as opposed to the 70mm IMAX screening I'll be going to once this review is out. But the film was still stunning to look at. Nolan and longtime collaborator Hoyt van Hoytema once again make magic together. On the most basic terms, it looks like a movie. The lighting is excellent, but the massive scope is caught with both restraints to not overindulge in itself, but just enough to really feel how big it is. And while I would say this is his most familiar score, something, less unique and something you would more expect from a blockbuster of this scale, but Ludwig Göransson's score is reliably incredible. Truthfully, there is a reading of The Odyssey that Christopher Nolan is just kind of jumping from one set piece to another. But yeah, I'm sorry, the set pieces are mesmerizing. When it leans into action, while it certainly doesn't stretch its R rating, it can be gruesome and exciting. The Trojan horse sequence is amazing, even results in some of the film's most devastating moments. And Oppenheimer showed us a little taste of some horror instincts in him, and this film shows us even more to the point where I'd love to see a full horror movie from him. Not to say it's like anything breathtaking, but he does lean all in on the weirdness of the Odyssey and leans into the terror of it. One such scene including zombie-esque creatures pulling right in from Night of the Living Dead. It's sincerely a haunting visual. The Cyclops sequence leans all in on the terror, building it up with complete eerie silence before the monster even arrives. There's even a sequence that leans completely into total body horror. That sequence had my jaw on the fucking floor, despite the fact that it's the most contained yet the most unhinged. The rest of the movie's self-seriousness could have used the absolute shock and awe of that moment. Now, not for nothing, but Christopher Nolan's an amazing filmmaker, is not exactly a hot take. He's a wizard at genre filmmaking and directing as a whole. Even a piece of shit like Tenet has some outstanding directing. Where I can't help but feel some distances from Nolan's common pitfalls, and that all lies in his writing. I know Nolan has a thing for non-linear storytelling, but at what point is he quite literally jerking off in front of a mirror? This is potentially the worst I've seen Nolan use the format, and in the grand scheme of his obvious thematic intentions, his look-at-me narrative format actually holds the film back from reaching its full potential. We don't even learn about Odysseus' internal struggle that he's supposedly really reckoning with and is destroying him from the inside throughout the whole film until the movie's like 20 minutes away from ending. Something like Project Hail Mary's non-linear reveal elevates Grace's personal journey in a new, devastating context. And even in Oppenheimer, the reveal of Strauss's petty involvement in Oppenheimer's downfall recontextualizes what we know about both of the central characters. And more importantly, establishes the type of man Strauss was when he goes on a self-aggrandizing and self-pitying rant. Here, though, Odysseus spends the whole movie stoically fighting his way past certain death. His main motivation to go home and save his men from a grim fate doesn't gel with the supposed self-inflicted terror he was supposed to be going through. I genuinely forgot that Christopher Nolan's genuinely pretty fucking bad at character writing. Many characters are either unimportant or poorly executed. Not to say none of them are watchable and they're all trash. The entire cast does their damnedest. I'll get to them in a second. But aside from perhaps John Leguizamo and Robert Pattinson's characters and fragments of the main cast, i.e. Damon, Hathaway, and Holland, there's not too much to them, or they don't quite hit the mark. Pattinson in particular just feels like a poor foil to Odysseus, not really playing that much of a factor to him, his role against Odysseus feeling mostly one-sided. And I can see how that fits with the themes, but when the two do unite, it feels lost. And Odysseus in particular, again, we learn the real meat of his character after it matters. There's really no point during the movie where I fully felt during this journey that Odysseus really wanted to get home because he loves his wife and kids so much. Most of his motivation seems to be centered around his men, which I won't say is unproductive, and it does make for captivating tension when he either accidentally or has no choice but to put them in danger. But then the final hour suggests, at least in part, that his family was the one and only motivator. Maybe one and only is aggressive, but nonetheless, I didn't fully feel the weight of his familial love driving him. I'll bring up the negativity a little bit by talking about the performances and the ensemble, because this is genuinely a murderer's row of talent. I was honestly afraid that filling every single role with a major A-list actor would be a deterrent, but every single actor steps up and it's never distracting. Matt Damon plays the typical stoic Nolan protagonist, never misses a beat, plays it about as one would expect from Matt Damon, which I don't say negatively, he is great. For the first 30 minutes, I was really excited for Tom Holland and what he was cooking up, as he was essentially the lead of the bunch of the movie. And a real maturity was shown, and while that's still the case, he does disappear for a large chunk. But when he is in it, he is great and does an excellent job of playing subtle devastation. His more louder outbursts is when he, falls a little flat. But I would still call this a step up for Holland. Anne Hathaway does an amazing job in all 30 minutes of her screen time, and she basically just crying the whole time, and she does a great job. It's Anne Hathaway, but, being a woman in a Nolan movie has its pitfalls. She is really the longing wife. Nolan tries to offset the criticisms of how he writes women by giving her character a little more political agency in the story, but it doesn't always land. But Hathaway's not at fault. Not that these women are bad, but Lupita Nyong'o is a little wasted, Zendaya is barely in it and not given that much to work with. Charlize Theron is a plot device. John Bernthal plays it as you would expect him to. He has to tell you something. He's got a very brief presence, but it's John Bernthal. He makes it work. Samantha Morton only has one scene, but it's potentially the best of the movie. She's once again fully weaponizing a one-scene character into something so memorable. She seems to have a true gift for that. Elliot Page is a great standout. I loved his character direction and performance. Himesh Patel is great. I'm a little surprised he's getting singled out by some, but he is in it a lot. He does have some great moments that he bounces off of with Damon. Robert Pattinson being one of the best working actors, he's obviously great. He's sniveling and gives such a great faux scary performance that hides a gigantic pussy. MVP, though, goes to John Leguizamo as the wise, trusted ally of Odysseus. He uses his Leguizamo charm to his advantage in every moment he has, but not that he's in it a lot, but he makes the most of every scene he's in. There's great intention behind this film. Nolan's set pieces may be the main passion of his, but it's not like he's not trying something else. It's in that way where the movie feels underwrought, as it's honestly just eating Oppenheimer's crumbs, like thematically. Wanting to take on the folly of mankind and reveling in our own self-destruction, but it doesn't fully land in the way it did in Oppenheimer. Part of that might be Nolan taking himself so aggressively seriously. It works in Oppenheimer because the story fits the self-seriousness, but here, not that it have to be silly, of course not, but there seems to be a lack of awareness that makes this movie's so full of itself a little. Again, I wouldn't call this an ego trip, but there is something a little missing. It works. It really works, trust me. But it can feel like a drag at times with its 3-hour runtime, even if what we're witnessing is so magnificent. His Dark Knight trilogy gets a reputation as the serious superhero trilogy, but what makes them work is Nolan's keen awareness of how ridiculous superheroes are. He cares, but he gets it. Here, he cares a lot, and it's good to take it seriously, but it can hold it down a little bit when his filmmaking is so technically excellent, but also not exactly trying anything beyond a best-case scenario baseline outside of these small fragmented moments. The third act does pull it all together well, and when my attention was brought back, and it reaches highs that I think Nolan was aiming for. But I do think a second viewing wouldn't be enhanced in a way other Nolan films would, now that we know what the puzzle is going to look like. It doesn't quite help that some of the action is a little more surface level, but narratively, the third act does reach a lot of great cathartic moments, aside from what I mentioned like before, not, being amazing at tying the whole film together thematically. So yeah, I wasn't all in on the Odyssey. I apologize. I don't think this is top tier Nolan, but I do have to concede that this being a mid-tier film of Nolan's filmography is an impressive feat. There's going to be some that tout this as an instant classic, as they do with many of Nolan's films, and I don't know if I quite agree with that. But for whatever misses there are, it makes up for by the sheer force of a master filmmaker going all in. A sword and sandals epic is something to be so grateful for, and I would never deter anyone from witnessing this. The Odyssey is a feat of filmmaking that is simply too undeniable to not bask in its glory. The set pieces and performances are all on the A game, as Christopher Nolan continues to show his commitment to the form. Where he falters is where he has in the past. His lofty character writing, endearment to non-linear storytelling when it's more of a step back here, and a narrative through line of man's undoing that doesn't reach the highs it reaches for. But this is pure cinematic bliss. Self-serious perhaps, but worthy of the big screen in ways most filmmakers aren't going for. And I'm going to give the Odyssey 7 Nolans out of 10. A lot of people really seem to love this movie, though. So, go and see this movie. I don't give a fuck. Just see the movie. Even if you end up agreeing with me, I'm seeing it again. And for that reason, I do think that, this is bound to be a massive hit. It's probably going to get Best Picture now. I don't really see the victory on this one. But, I think a nomination should be fine. I think Nolan directing it, just, you got that little afterglow from Oppenheimer. I think he would get a directing nomination. I think a win would be a little bit of a stretch. I don't know, something about a win just isn't feeling quite as right, although I think on a technical level it makes sense. And then tech-wise, it's come on, costumes happening for sure. Score happening for sure. I don't think Ludwig's winning again, though, I gotta be honest. Cinematography, that could win. I could see that. Sound could win, they do some stuff there. Production design, I think that's gonna happen, but I think that's a pretty obvious no-win. Visual effects, that's definitely happening. There's more than enough to work with for visual effects. I don't remember this song, to be honest, so I can't judge. I know Travis Scott has a song, but I don't remember it. Makeup and hair, I suppose it's there. I think Leguizamo is aged up a little, and again, there's a body horror sequence that is fucking mental. Editing, sure, although if I'm being honest, I found it a little janky at times. Screenplay. Yeah, maybe. There's definitely it's definitely dialogue heavy, but I do think a lot of its focus is on its set pieces, and I think that's what most people are gonna remember from this movie. My hair is so fucking long, bro. I don't know. I'm a little iffy on that. Casting, in theory, yes, but I don't know. Casting, there's something really interesting about its casting. Again, every little minor role is filled with an A-lister, and I think that could pull it back, especially after what we saw last year. There's a couple of silent roles that with memorable faces, so maybe that could push it in. I don't know. I don't know enough about the category yet. I think if we're going off of last year's noms, I guess it wouldn't get in, but again, we're at the beginning of this category. Now, as far as acting goes, I think Hathaway, I think she'll get in. She is missing from a lot of this movie, but she's sobbing in every scene that she's in. Yeah. As for everyone else, I think Damon would miss. It's that Tom Cruise and Top Gun Maverick type of performance that, he's not doing anything you wouldn't expect from him. And he's doing it in a very stoic manner. His biggest, Oscar moment is silent. So I would guess he wouldn't get in. I don't think Samantha Morton's getting in for her one scene. As far as supporting actor goes, I think Pattinson is out. I do not think that's happening. I don't think Holland's happening either, to be honest. I think, never say never for him. But honestly, I think if anyone's getting in as supporting actor, I think it's John Leguizamo. I think he's kind of had, the old wise, ally role that, could be, Oscar baity. He's got some scenes to play with. He's got prosthetics. And, you know, not that Leguizamo is, like, overdue or anything, but I definitely can see the case that, like, it's his time. Like, he's worked with a lot of people, and a lot of people like him. I don't know. I don't know if I put him in for now, but if anyone outside of Hathaway would get in, I would lean towards John Leguizamo. It's not winning Best Picture, though. Like, that's not happening. All right. That's what you got. That's what I got for you. Go watch The Odyssey. Let's come and share. Bye-bye.